Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for Coffee and Conversation. I'm so glad that y'all are here and able to tune in with us as we have these wonderful discussions. I love our coffee and conversation.
I do too. And this being the second day of March, Women's History Month,
Yes.
Celebrate that. Happy Women's History Month to all.
Thank you.
You're welcome, especially to the women.
Yes. And there's so many wonderful women in the Bible.
There are.
And we kind of talked about some of these questions. And you said you were going to bring in women of the Bible. So I'm
going to try to in the answers. Yeah, we have some questions from Sunday sermon, but this is your lead, so go for it.
Okay, so it is from Sunday sermon,
which was about
wilderness, being alone or feeling alone, but you're never alone because God is with you, right?
And that the wilderness times can be God times.
Yes, absolutely. But sometimes it can be hard to see God in those wilderness times, in those alone times. So how do you recognize that God is present with you when you have that feeling of loneliness?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer. Part of it is, I think, recognize the recognition of God being present in those isolation, alone times, wilderness times, perhaps comes after.
I couldn't agree more.
Oh yeah,
honestly, I couldn't agree more. I think that's the right answer.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it comes after, and yes. I think about some that it came after. So recognizing it, I think, comes after. Hindsight's 20/20. But when you really look at it, and because when you're in the wilderness, kind of in those trenches, it's really hard to see.
Yeah.
At that point, so if you can get the balcony view, or after that, you look back and you go, yeah, I recognize that God was with me in this time, and here's how I recognize it. Other recognize it, maybe not so much recognize it, but during the times, you go by faith and trust.
Yes.
And this is where they were with the wilderness, with the Hebrew people, and Miriam, Moses' sister. She was as important as Moses and Aaron because she was there as a leader and support for Moses, just as Aaron was. And she's the one who makes this wonderful song of praise after they've crossed the Red Sea and escaping.
Right.
Okay. And she makes this song of praise. So she's seeing God in it as it's happening.
Right.
But then this wilderness time comes, and you have the stories of Moses getting frustrated, Moses getting angry, and Miriam just seems to be this constant.
Yeah.
That I think she was relying in her faith, relying on that promise. Hey, Moses, remember, God said he'd be with you, and God said he'd be with us, and God is delivering us. There's this promise, so I'm going to put my faith there.
Oh, I like that.
And now Miriam and Aaron do get a little perturbed at Moses at one time, but that's a different story, a different time. It's kind of a fun story. But yeah, so she kind of, in what I see in the little snippets, we don't get as much of her as we do Moses and Aaron. But yeah.
So I like how you brought up that Miriam remembered that promise that God is there. God said he's going to be here. God said he's going to be here. And God, we know because God has said that he is there for us and he's always there for us. But sometimes when we don't see him, do you think it's okay to be like, God, I need you. God, please be here. Even maybe ask, like, God, please show me that you're here. Is that okay?
Well, absolutely. And we have examples of that in the Psalms, some of the prayers. I think we also have that perhaps with Job, in the question.
Yeah, yes.
I need to see that. And so, yeah, and especially in the Psalms, we see some of that. God, I need to know.
So this is kind of different, but sometimes, and I have felt this. So let's.
So we're going to go down a little different road.
We're going to go a different road.
We're going to go a different road.
Okay.
All right.
So we're alone, and we feel alone. And a lot of times we know God is there, or we want to know God is there. But sometimes I may be a little bit angry and be like, God, I don't want you here right now. Just leave me alone. Or I don't want to listen, or I don't want to see. And I don't know that that's necessarily okay. But even in those moments when you feel that, like I'll look back and I'll be like, oh, God never left me. He probably lifted me up higher.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
sometimes, it's just out of anger. And I don't necessarily like to admit that. But there have been times when I'm like, God, just leave me alone. Just, I don't want to know. I don't want to see. I just want to be angry. And he's there. Is it okay to feel that way?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. God is big enough to handle our anger.
Well, and it takes me back to the footprints on the sand, when you're so low and there's only one set of footprints, but it's God holding you up. So
Right.
sometimes it's that feeling of, maybe I just want to be alone. I don't want God there, but he's lifting you up anyways, because sometimes you can't move forward without being lifted up by God. And so then
Right.
Yeah.
And what psalm is it? Is Psalm 137, Psalm 138, where it really shows the anger of the people.
Yes.
Now I'm back in. Right. They really, and they wanted revenge.
Yes.
So they were into exile, and they really wanted revenge on the Babylonian people that destroyed them and raised their temple. And they're sitting there by the rivers of Babylon, and they make this prayer, and it's Psalm 137. And they're really wanting revenge. So there's this anger, but they start recognizing that God is there. And yet they're saying, but God, are you? Because, we hung up our lyres and our harps, we put them on the trees, we can't sing a song about Zion. How could we possibly sing the Lord's song on a foreign soil? But then they were talking to God, do this. And so, they're in that exact spot.
Yeah.
They're in that exact spot.
Yeah. It's nice to see that, to read that in the Bible, because sometimes when I'm feeling that way, I think, I look back and I think I should not have felt that way, but it's such a human feeling.
It is.
And we are human, and so are they. And
well, God created us that way.
God created us that way, and God created us with all the emotions, and he is there for us through all of our emotions.
Even Jesus got angry.
Yes, and even when we don't see him or want him there, he's there for us.
Right.
And I think that's really important.
And the other great thing about that is, in the anger, you said, okay, but you're still talking to God, right?
You're still talking
to God.
Yes, yes.
So you still have this relationship. You still acknowledge that.
Yes.
You're still in that conversation with God. And we usually don't get angry with someone that we don't have a relationship with.
Right.
And we usually don't get angry about something that's really not important.
Right.
And so with that anger, even the anger towards God, it just shows that relationship. Someone in the aisle at the grocery store, usually you don't get really angry with this person just because they're buying a different brand of shampoo than you are.
Right.
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 You might get perturbed at them because they have 50 items and you're in the 10-item lane. But that's just standard operating procedure nowadays.
It is. It's true. I really like how you mentioned that, even though, because I never thought about it like that, I will get angry sometimes and God, just leave me alone. But I am still talking to God, and he is still there. And even though I may be saying, God, I don't want you here, I don't want to listen right now, I'm still talking to him, and I'm still listening to him.
Yes.
And I still have that relationship to him, even though I'm feeling like I don't want it, it's still there.
Yeah, and that's exactly the story of Moses in the wilderness with the people.
Yeah.
The wilderness story.
The wilderness story.
Yeah.
So, the wilderness story.
Yes, even in the times of wilderness, it can be a God time.
It can be a God time, and I think when I think about that story, I think of the challenges. But also, it can be a really good thing, right? Your relationship can grow so much with God. So I know we have that in the story of Moses, but what are some other examples of that? And I'll give a personal example of that. I feel like the last couple years have been my wilderness time. But my faith even in the times when I was angry and I'm still talking to God because I'm like, God, I'm angry and why are you letting this happen or whatever, my faith has grown so much. And then sometimes I think I'm losing a little bit of it, but then I will think I'm losing a little bit of that faith, and then it just grows even more. It's like climbing up the mountain, and my faith just keeps growing. And it's that wilderness time that my faith has grown immensely. So that's just my wilderness story.
I think that's a great story.
Thank you.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
And we see that in other stories with the wilderness, not with the Hebrew people, but if you think about Jesus in the wilderness, which is what we're doing, it's in patience, the time of Jesus in the wilderness for our sermon series during this Lenten season. And I think about the woman at the well.
Yeah.
Okay, so here she was, alone, isolated. I mean, the well, it was out from the main village or city, and she went when no one else was there, because she was not accepted. So this is kind of her wilderness time. I mean, she gets to go home, but it's still,
Right.
Symbolically a wilderness time, and she is isolated.
Yeah.
And Jesus comes, and the Samaritan woman at the well, and sits with her and talks with her.
Yeah.
And meets her where she's at.
I like that.
And talks to her, and then at the end of the story, she walks me, telling everybody, come and meet this. Could this be the Christ? I mean, wow. And so, those wilderness times, a time of trusting in God, but also a time of new discovery. And I think that's what happens with the woman at the well, is this new discovery. And for Jesus in the time in the wilderness, we're going to see that it is a discovery time for Jesus as well.
Absolutely.
in this time of testing.
I like that you brought in that time of discovery, because that's also what we're doing in the season of Lent.
Mm-hmm.
And Lent can be that time of a wilderness time, and that season of discovery. And so I really like that you brought that in. So you use this time during Lent, discover, and remember, I like that you said also, Jesus will meet you there.
Yes.
God meets you there. You don't have to go. He's there. He's there to meet you. He's ready for you. So.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Enjoyed this.
Yes, it was a great conversation. We will see you next week for Coffee and Conversations, and don't forget to tune in Sunday at 10:45 on Facebook, YouTube, or you can come in person. We'd love to see you for our tradition service. See you then.
Bye, and go Detroit Tigers.
Go Astros!